Before we begin, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe and like the video. It really helps us share real history and bring important stories like this to more people. Some prisoners lost toes or entire feet. Disease, typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, and pneumonia spread unchecked. With no medical care, even minor infections became fatal. Violence guards beat prisoners with rifle butts, sticks, or whips. Shootings were routine. Sometimes guards fired into columns without warning to enforce fear. The march itself became a moving killing field. Civilian witnesses. Unlike the camps, the death marches unfolded in public. Columns of prisoners passed through villages, towns, and farms across Germany, Austria, and occupied territories. Reactions varied. Some civilians looked away, fearful or indifferent. Others secretly left food or water along the roads. A few openly helped prisoners and paid with their lives. These moments revealed a moral crossroads: fear versus compassion. Women on the death marches. Women suffered uniquely on the marches. Evacuations from Ravensbrück forced tens of thousands of women onto the roads. Many were ill, pregnant, or caring for younger prisoners. Sexual violence occurred amid the chaos, though it remains underreported. Women often formed support networks, linking arms, sharing scraps of food, carrying the weakest among them. Survival frequently depended on solidarity. Children and teenagers. Children were not exempt. Teenagers and even younger children were forced to march alongside adults. Many were orphans. Without strength or protection, they collapsed quickly. Some survived only because adults shielded them or helped them walk. Their presence on the death marches stands as one of the clearest indictments of the system that created them. Death marches in the West. As Allied forces advanced from France and Belgium, camps in Western Germany were also evacuated. From Bergen-Belsen and satellite camps linked to Neuengamme, prisoners were driven north and east. Some marches lasted weeks. Others ended abruptly when guards fled or surrendered as Allied troops approached. Trains and death transports. Not all evacuations were on foot. Many prisoners were transported by rail in conditions just as deadly. Freight cars were sealed shut. Hundreds were crammed inside without ventilation, food, or sanitation. Many suffocated. Others froze. Survivors described bodies standing upright, held in place by the press of living prisoners. The Baltic Sea tragedies. In one of the final atrocities, thousands of prisoners were loaded onto ships in the Baltic Sea. As Allied aircraft attacked German vessels, unaware that they carried prisoners, ships were sunk. One such tragedy involved the sinking of the Cap Arcona, resulting in thousands of deaths. Survivors who reached shore were sometimes shot by guards or local forces. These deaths were not accidental. They were the result of deliberate decisions to move prisoners into active war zones. Liberation on the march. Some death. Marches ended in liberation. Allied soldiers encountered columns of skeletal prisoners guarded by SS men who often fled. Liberation scenes were chaotic. Survivors unable to stand. Corpses lining the roads. Prisoners too weak to understand they were free. Many died even after liberation, their bodies beyond recovery. Psychological aftermath. Survivors carried deep trauma. Survivor's guilt. Nightmares and silence. Lifelong physical pain. Difficulty rebuilding identity. For many, the death marches were remembered as worse than the camps, not because conditions were harsher, but because death felt constant and unavoidable. Evidence and justice. After the war, death marches were investigated during the Nuremberg trials and later prosecutions. Testimonies, documents, and mass graves confirmed that these marches were organized crimes. Some perpetrators were executed. Many were never punished. Memory and commemoration. Today, Memorial marches retrace original routes. Names are read aloud. Stones mark places where prisoners collapsed. Memory serves as resistance against denial and forgetting. Conclusion. The meaning of the death marches. The death marches represent the final moral collapse of a regime built on dehumanization. They show that even in defeat, cruelty was chosen over humanity. These marches were not about relocation. They were about control, fear, and destruction. To remember the death marches is to honor the victims, and to recognize the responsibility of memory itself. Final words. Why the death marches must be remembered. The death marches were not the result of chaos alone. They were the final expression of a system that had long abandoned humanity. Even as defeat was inevitable, cruelty remained organized, deliberate, and enforced. These marches revealed a painful truth. When a regime defines human beings as disposable, suffering does not end with the collapse of power. It intensifies. The prisoners were not moved to save them. They were moved to control them, to silence them, and in many cases to ensure they would not survive to bear witness. For those who lived through the death marches, survival was not a victory without cost. Bodies were broken, families erased, and memories carried in silence for decades. Many survivors spoke later of a feeling that never fully left them, the sense that they had walked through a world where life no longer had value. The roads, forests, and villages where these marches took place may appear ordinary today. Yet beneath them lies an invisible graveyard, stretching across Europe, marking the paths where tens of thousands were driven to their deaths. These places remind us that history does not only live in camps and memorials, but in everyday landscapes shaped by human choices. Remembering the death marches is not only an act of mourning, it is an act of responsibility. It demands that we recognize how quickly moral boundaries can disappear when obedience replaces conscience and fear replaces compassion. The victims of the death marches were denied dignity in life and in death. Memory is the dignity we can still give them. Their suffering asks something of us, to remember, to speak, and to ensure that no human being is ever again forced to walk such a road.